Jelani, you and I have done this a lot. As we were playing that video, it's very, very, very difficult to watch this. In fact, I've got people sort of tweeting saying, I'm a mother, I can't watch this. But that is the bearing of witness of what happens.
I mean, I think that's a wise decision. How many of these videos have we seen?
Yeah.
And just, personally, between the two of us and millions of people watching, how many weeks and months afterward do those videos ricochet around in your head at random points? How haunting is that? And we relive this spectacle. Now, what is shocking, to the extent that anything so routine in this country can be shocking, is the fact that we see this and have the emotional reaction that we have, and yet institutionally, that seems to have no weight in preventing these actions from repeating themselves. Again
Right. You would think, I mean, what Alex Wagner was saying is this happened faster, the charges came faster, the police were fired relatively quickly, but it happened.
But this is the problem with that, right? I would like to think that that's progress. And maybe I'm being cynical, but it also is self-preservation.
Right.
People understand that is that horrific length of time between an incident and there being any sort of consequences for it, where public tensions amp up. And that's where you wind up with things spilling over into violence,
right,
where you wind up with protests happening in other cities nationwide. So people have mastered the protocols of how to respond to an incident like this. They can't seem to master the protocols
of not having them happen.
Not having them happen
in the first place. Mark Claxton, let me ask you about that, because that was the surprising part of this video. This video looked like something that could have happened years ago, before the public used to see videos, before there were body cameras, before people had cell phones. I would have thought, after all of the experiences we've had in the last few years, these Memphis cops would understand someone's going to get you on tape, and this does not look like proper policing.
Well, Ali, watching the video of these black police officers engaged in this brutal, sadistic lynching, and that's the appropriate terminology for what we witnessed, unfortunately, is a clear demonstration of toxic police culture, which too often subsumes the individual police officer's own culture, his own socio-political beliefs, and compels him, forces him or her to engage in this type of devastatingly dangerous, deadly behavior that lacks humanity. They're caught up in the system, and the system is toxic police culture. So it has much more to do with that than even the discussion that should occur about the role that race plays in law enforcement, which I have often talked about.
Yep.
But we just have to realize that what we're witnessing is toxic police culture manifest.
Philip, let me ask you about that. Let's examine that a little bit, because racism in policing is a power dynamic. Racism everywhere is a power dynamic. But sometimes bad policing is a power dynamic. There are people who get pulled over by police, and a casual viewer, a reasonable person might say, why would you run from police if you're not doing anything? Why would you struggle with police if you're not doing anything? Except there are a whole bunch of people in this country and around the world who say getting caught by police might be the end of them. Certainly might result in charges that they shouldn't face. But, what do you say to people who say, why do you run?
So I want to be clear, because we've seen so many of these and they're so difficult to look at that we often miss the details of it. I don't want to be too in the weeds when we have the broader conversation, but as they're telling him to get on his belly, lie flat, one officer is holding his right arm while the other one is twisting the left arm in the other direction.
Right.
He would have had to struggle out of the grip of the officers in order to lie flat. He was complying as much as his 140-pound body could against 5 grown men who were trained to engage in hand-to-hand combat. He was then tased, right? It hurt, because tasers hurt. And his body twitched. In that twitching, you can see the twitching gets him out of the officer's grasp. And he realizes that the thing that's hurting him is in his clothes. If he takes it off, he can stop hurting. And so he runs away from the pain and the people who literally might be trying to murder him there on the ground. If you think that that is an unreasonable set of things to do, I'm sorry, I don't care about your opinion, because you are an unreasonable person. He ran from people who were, by the way, all of them infinitely less calm than he was, infinitely less reasonable in that situation and mellow and with his wits about than he was in that moment. And he ran away from them because he feared they might murder him. When they caught up with him, they held him by the arms, they punched him, they beat him, they batoned him, they cursed him. And then while he was lying near unconscious up against the squad car, they lied about him. What you guys have not shown yet and what is available on the Memphis Police Department website is they're saying, oh, he had the gun of the officer. He was reaching for it and he had it good. He beat us. He was so strong. He was 140 pounds.
Right.
They lied to him there in part, and this is where I will go ahead and end this part of me trying to keep it together, in part because the officer with the baton turned away as the other officers were beating him. He literally moved the body camera so that that wouldn't be caught on tape. This was an incredibly brutal, deliberate response to them being out of shape, for them having pepper sprayed themselves in the face like the Keystone Cops, but far deadlier. This was the worst version of contempt of cop. And so when you see people running from the police, they imagine, as this individual did, that you can get killed because a cop is bad at their job, they get angry, and they want to kill you in response. We have videotape evidence of exactly that. That is what we watched. And if you see the nearly hours worth of footage they have from 4 different angles on that website, that is exactly what you will see.
I'm actually appreciative, Philip, that you are going into some of these details, because it is hard to watch, and a lot of people won't elect to watch for versions of the same hour-long stuff. But Jelani, the point that Philip makes is interesting, that at one point you hear him say, you guys are really doing a lot right now. They're saying, get on the ground, and you're seeing video of him. He's on the ground, and yet they're saying, get on the ground, because they didn't like, apparently, the way he was on the ground. The concept of the power dynamic between police and civilians fully plays out in this video. You are seeing them bark instructions at him. He seems to be doing what they want him to do. Then he gets exasperated. He realizes, this is not going my way. Everything they tell me to do isn't working. And then he makes a run for it. And unfortunately, I think that might have sealed his fate.
Well, I mean, I think his fate was sealed from the minute that officer dragged him out of that car. And the other part of it, to Phil's point, is that where does police de-escalation come in here? He was the person behaving the way a law enforcement officer is theoretically trained to behave. His tone is moderate. He's saying that he is complying. They are screaming at him at a high decibel. He's responding in a moderate tone until he realizes that none of that works. He does the reasonable thing. For anyone who wonders why he ran away, you would have to ask what you would do in a situation where you were surrounded by people who were using aggressive physical force against you, and nothing you did seemed to be able to calm them down. That is just a basic reality of it.